Welcome to Digital Currents, brought to you by Morgan Creek Digital. I'm Xavier Segura. Each episode, we spotlight the topics and people changing the tech industry with a focus on AI, blockchain, chips, and big data. Thanks for listening, and please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
Mark, we're back on. We're both wearing green, although probably a different reason today than we would have hoped. I was pulling for you, but I will say that Lou Holtz was right that, they would be kind of giving Ohio State all that they could muster. And I still think that he would win against Brian Day one-on-one. What?
I agree completely. Yeah, my green is definitely a little more muted today. It was fun to be there. We are recording early this week because of snow and travel. And so I don't have any reveal today. I have no good pants. I just have black pants on. You can't even really say black pants. And maybe that's because I'm mourning the loss.
Hard.
But I don't even have the socks on today. Normally I wear Bitcoin socks every day, but it was so cold here today. I think it's the coldest day in America. I think they said ever. I don't know if that's really true, but they said it based on average temperatures and the number of new lows. But I had to shovel snow in North Carolina, and so I put on wool socks to go outside and shovel so we could try to get out of our driveway. We were unsuccessful. Just one more reason not to get an electric car, because the torque sucks in the snow. It just spins the tires, and then that flattens the snow into ice, and it was not good.
So there was no muscle memory. I used my dinosaur powered snowblower. We got about half a foot here, and even though the underlying company of the snowblower, Mark, has gone bankrupt, which is Craftsman, the machine still worked as the internal combustion engine has been perfected over 100 years.
That's awesome. No, it's awesome. And look, we didn't get that much. We got, less than 2 inches for sure. But we just don't know how to handle it. Snow blowers, they don't exist in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And we have one snowplow in Chapel Hill. So it's not coming to my neighborhood anytime soon. The worst, and then we'll talk about the markets, but the worst was right after I moved here, we had a snow-a-cane. And you say, what, Mark, is a snow-a-cane? Well, we've all heard of nor'easters, right? Where the normal spin of a storm is westerly, and they come up and they go back out to sea. Well, every once in a while you get one that spins the opposite way in an easterly pattern, and mostly they hit the northeast, hence the nor'easter. But occasionally you get one in February, March down here in North Carolina, off the coast, and it picks up all the moisture from the ocean and then just dumps on North and South Carolina. So we got like 20 inches of snow. And literally, we could not get out of our house, out of our drive for 4 days. I mean, it was hilarious. So anyway, but nothing like that this time.
I mean, nothing like that. Thankfully, I know Florida had a state of emergency, and you raised the point. It's just that there's just no infrastructure there. There's no, dump trucks that can be repurposed for salt, and how are you going to order the salt? So yeah, people were struggling. Fortunately, this is one of the nice things of being able to record this show from home. We will push on our listeners.
Right.
I think would be
push on as the markets have done.
That's right.
I mean, this is a big week, huge week in that, when we were recording last week, it was on the eve of the crypto ball, on the eve of the inauguration. And oh my gosh, X. I mean, only what was it? 12 hours later, almost exactly 12 hours after we recorded at 9:44 p.m. on Friday, Trump, the meme coin, was launched.
Oh yeah.
All the glitterati were at the ball, right? Not with their phones. And so a very small number of people we're kind of online on a casual Friday night, and this thing dropped without much fanfare at 18 cents. And, no, 80% held by someone, arguably someone involved with the Trump family, or, who knows who. People say, oh, it's Barron, I don't know, maybe, or Eric, or this group that World Financial Inc. Somebody owns 80%, but the 20% just went totally parabolic, right? It went, $1 billion, then $6 billion, then $20 billion, and it got all the way. I'm not going to remember the numbers exactly, but it got to like $30 from 18 cents by kind of midnight-ish. And then people went to sleep. And overnight, it went to $74. And at one point had I think a $60 billion market cap. And, of course, fully diluted. See, now herein lies one of my personal pet peeves about everything in finance that follows this. So according to this calculation, if there's X number of coins available and the last token sold, like one token sold for $74, then the other billion tokens are worth $74. Well, that's insane. Because if that original 80% that's locked up, if even one of those sells and people smell a pump and dump, that price is collapsing, which has happened in the past few days,
And not to be outdone, right, Mark? Because it's like you can't just have one coin and then the kind of the alleged rug pull. If you had some questions about it, once the Melania coin was debuted, shortly thereafter, you had one investor putting in, I think it was $800K and locked in something like 2,000% profit. According to Live on Things.
The Melania coin drained liquidity from Trump coin, in theory. In fact, there was I should remember who it was, and I give him credit, but somebody on Twitter, I assume they fed this into like ChatGPT and said, hey, describe in Donald's voice, I shouldn't call him Donald, President Trump, describe in President Trump's voice what just happened with the Melania coin. And he's like, well, we had the most beautiful coin. It was the most beautiful coin ever. It was so fantastic, and it was going so high, and it was such a beautiful coin. And my wife issued another coin, and clearly, have to get another wife, because you can't have the wife draining liquidity from the most beautiful coin in history. And we'll have to get another more beautiful wife. It was kind of funny. And look, I don't think they're going to get divorced. I guess today is their 20th anniversary or 25th anniversary.
Well, congratulations to them.
Fun fact, random, ridiculous fact, right? What the internet's full of.
Oh, yeah.
Melania's dress, when they got married, weighed 66 pounds.
66 pounds.
Think of the train on that page. The train was like 50 feet long or something. I mean,
wow.
It was a dress. I think she needed many handlers.
No doubt.
I did not realize this, and maybe I'm just not in the know. Don't read enough People magazine, but did you know that she was a direct descendant of the Russian czars?
I did not know that, Mark. That's why I love the internet and why I love doing the show.
And here's the crazy thing, and I find this part hard to believe, so I should fact check it before I even say it out loud. But supposedly, Adam Schiff, right, the congressman, senator, whatever, I should know what he is, but whatever he is, supposedly his great-great-grandfather was the person who sent the execution order of the czar. Like, who was her great-great-grand, maybe it was her great-great, I can't remember the whole story, but I'm like, oh, come on. I mean, that's like truth is stranger than fiction, if that's actually true.
It's too close, yeah, because we remember, Mark, he was that famous senator from California who was credited with leading some of the impeachment proceedings, right, of her husband. So it is quite a circle of joy, and would make it for a very awkward Thanksgiving dinner. But I think, the points with what we're seeing with some of these coins, I mean, what we said, it's very easy to get caught up in the hysteria. And of course, we don't mean to poke fun of this too much, because we know that some people are really impacted here. And a lot of times, these people who don't have all the facts on trying to make an informed investment decision. That's what we always say on our show. We don't partake in meme coins, not because they can't make money. Oh, you can make a ton of money. I think Melania coin was like 26,000%, something like that, if you got into the right times, which most people did not. But the idea is it's much more stable in terms of figuring out what is the underlying infrastructure. Things like Bitcoin, when you figure out a way, okay, when I look at the hash rate, how many people are actually using this? What is the overall utility? Okay, what are sovereign nations doing? What are individual technology companies doing? You can kind of understand, and even that comes with the risk of, okay, don't invest more than you can lose, have this as a certain part of your alts allocation, parentheses, disclaimer. But if you figure out how you can say, I'm going to make 25,000 on the black roulette wheel, that's effectively what you're doing on some of these coins.
No, it's a really important point. And I'm not criticizing people who play in the meme game. I mean, my I can't call them old because they're younger than me, but my former partners are active in, one of them in particular is active in the meme space, and has tried to convince me to buy things like Retardio. I'm like, no, I'm not. On the name, I can't buy that, or Giga Chad, or SPX 6900. But the reality of it is, and I don't know if Pomp said it. I mean, Pomp quotes a lot of other people, so maybe someone else said, but it is a monetization of attention, right? And I saw a guy today talking about this, that in essence, it has a lot of similarities to cults. Now, cult is a very politically charged word. It has really negative connotations. But the behavior of cults is belief, irregardless of facts, right? You believe that leader, whatever they tell you to drink the Kool-Aid. You see people dying, you're still going to drink the Kool-Aid because, you're in the cult. And so that belief system is, there's some things about it. People call Bitcoin a cult and Ethereum, and it's like religions and cult. But at the end of the day, the meme part is the way this guy was explaining. He says, well, it's on the community. If your community is a bunch of paper-handed, quick trip traders, right? So they're like, hey, let's get in when it's, a few 100K or a couple million market cap, and then let's get this thing to 10 and flip it, to other people who then think it's going to go up. That's a game that's played every day in the microcap stock world, and the back room, the boiler rooms, and the Wolf of Wall Street and all that. That's as old as time. But the difference is when a community convinces themselves that the asset is going to be worth 100 billion, right? And you say, well, based on what? Like worth implies value. So based on what? Well, based on nothing other than we want it to be that number. Dogecoin is a good example of that. So Dogecoin literally has I think $65 billion market cap. But you're like, based on what? Based on Elon saying that someday it'll be useful for something. Okay. Maybe, but right now it's just based on that no one will sell. And the point of is a long way of saying, his point was the cultists will never sell. So if there's no supply and it hits some price where people pay attention, that monetizes the attention thing, and new demand comes in, the only thing that can happen in a financial asset with limited supply and increased demand is price go up. Now, coming back to, a real asset, Bitcoin. Now, I say, why is that a real asset? Well, it actually has utility, which again is just from belief and custom, not baked in utilities. Like gold is a metal that became a store of value, right? I mean, think about blocks of metal sitting in vaults being valued. It's like, really? I mean, could have been rocks or bones or jewels or anything else, but happened to be the metal. But by belief and custom, we made it the thing because it was scarce, provably scarce, and because it was difficult to create. And that's what I think separates Bitcoin from other things, right? It's difficult to create. There is proof of work. There is hash rate that you mentioned. Whereas a meme coin, they literally said the Melania coin was coded between like midnight on the crypto ball and whatever, 3 o'clock the next day when it released. So somebody said, hey, this Trump thing worked. Let's create. And I guess they're not the same group, which everyone thought they were. And that, next was going to be the Eric coin and the Baron coin and the, Trump hinted there'd be a US coin.
We have to be careful about this, right? Because I think it could be a potentially bad omen if left unchecked. And I think, as we always say on our show, greed is undefeated, because then the U.S. asset managers like Osprey and RecShares have already submitted filings to the SEC for a range of ETFs, including the Trump meme coin and Dogecoin and Bonk. So I think, are they part of the problem? Arguably, yes. Do they create the problem? No. I think they're kind of trying to fulfill a service for allowing people to buy things that are on-chain in an easier way. But I think people still have to do their research, still listen to the show and understand kind of what are the fundamentals here, because it drove massive amounts of volume in a very short amount of time, right? We were talking about, 80 billion, right? Basically in a weekend. And that doesn't happen in regular markets because regular markets close, but that's not what's happening here. So you have to really monitor this in the same way. And if you have an ETF structure, which could be even more dangerous because you have certain restrictions and windows when you can come in and out of positions, I think it's very difficult if we're thinking about consumer protections as one of those things where first we got to clean up crypto, right? We got to take out the bad CEOs. And then we have to figure out a way to kind of get our policymakers in lockstep so they understand what this is. So we can't just now create easier mechanisms for people to potentially lose their shirt when they don't really understand. So I don't really buy that it's, something where people can go without any sort of warning out into the buzzsaw.
Such an important point. And this belief that because, Trump figured out, with somebody's help, probably Eric or somebody, that, hey, there's this whole group of voters, mostly young, mostly male, actually, that are one issue voters.
Yeah.
They're all about the orange coin, right? And crypto broadly, but mostly about the orange coin. So, hey, if you pander to them, then you can get their vote. And so he goes to Nashville and now, I will say he made a bunch of promises. He said he'd get rid of Gary Gensler on day one. Well, he didn't have to because Gary quit, but Gary's still on. So good. And we'll come back to that in a second. He said he would free Ross. Now, he didn't do it on day one, but here we are, day 2-ish or 3, whatever day it is. But Ross went home today. I mean, that is awesome. Ross Ulbricht is what I'm talking about.
Right.
And he paid his debt to society. I mean, he made a website. He wasn't the drug dealer. He coded a website. And by the logic that he went to jail for 2 life sentences plus 40 years, which is ridiculous. But by that logic, everyone who ever made a road should go to jail because roads have been used by terrorists. And anyone who ever was involved in printing money, or in running a bank, we can link the banks to way worse terrorist activity than anything happened on the Silk Road with a little weed getting sold or meth. But not that that's good, but it's the tool is not the problem. It's the people doing it, right? But so Trump figured it out. But the idea that he's going to appoint Ueda, and I think I'm pronouncing his name right, who's the new SEC commissioner, who is definitely pro Bitcoin and pro crypto-ish. We don't know yet, because this idea, to your point, that pro crypto means everything goes. It's the Wild West, and you can do anything you want with no limitations. Well, no, fraud is still bad.
Correct.
And pump and dumps are still bad. And all the stuff that needs a market mechanism that gives you safety and security and comfort, it's kind of like, it's like law enforcement, right? I mean, laws are necessary, so we know what the boundaries are. Law enforcement is necessary, so we know that what happens if we cross the line. Like I say this all the time. I love the fact that, I've watched, 1920, whatever the prequel to 1923 is on the Yellowstone thing, 1863, whatever it is. In 1863, you sat on your porch with your gun protecting your property because people on horses would come with bigger guns and just take it from you and kill you if they wanted. So I don't have to do that anymore. And I'm grateful for that because we live in a rule of law society. But if you start breaking down those rules, and if having Ueda and Hester Pierce now running the crypto task force, if you believe, which I think people do, that means anything goes, that's bad. Because I don't believe either one of those people think anything goes. I don't even think the Donald thinks anything goes. Now, look, I believe since day one that, now President Trump for the second time is really about enriching himself and his family. That's okay. I'm allowed to have that belief. Probably shouldn't say it online where they're listening to me, but Putin even did it better, right? He didn't really confiscate the assets. He just said, well, in order for you to have unfettered access to be a bank, it's a good business, you just got to give me a piece. And he would just take a piece, and then he made money when they made money, and everything was good.
Now, Mark, for Solana here, though, Solana was one of those kind of to build off of your roads analogy. So they were the road for the meme coin. The reason you can create this so quickly is because, they offer a toolkit to developers to basically be able to copy and paste what somebody else did. And I'd be curious to see how much of the Joe Biden meme coin is shared with Trump. So maybe they have a lot more similarities than would have been thought.
Remember, we had Bo Jiden or whatever.
Oh yeah, it was through the roof.
We had all kinds of the year. And to your point, and then what happened with Solana? I get in trouble when I talk about this, and Solana has a problem. It gets congested and it just shuts down.
Yeah.
And that's not acceptable. Like if you're a road and you get a lot of cars and you just said, we're just going to stop working. And you cars, you're stuck and you can't go anywhere. And so that happened over the weekend. Like literally people were trying to, get transactions processed and it just couldn't do it. Sent out a little memo saying, hey, 8,000 transactions a minute. Well, I don't care, right? If you say your network is good, then it should be able to scale.
Yes, and it dropped one, right? It dropped all the way down to 170 before propelling now to 270. Off the back of some of these tokens or meme coins rather. And then there's this idea that it can continue to rally based on, well, if we look at pairs of Web 2 technology into Web 3, we say that Filecoin could be, that next sort of decentralized layer of storage, in akin to Dropbox or something like that. Pick your cloud provider. Some argument might be made for Solana in the positive that it could be the true decentralized social media, right? Because now you're basically financially rewarding popularity and likeness. That could be a little bit of a stretch when we see some of these rug pulls that are happening right before our eyes. But I don't think Solana is necessarily done with this growth, at least in the short term, right? Because you have the ETFs that are kind of lining up, as we've already seen. There's ETFs lined up for literally the meme coins themselves. So the underlying infrastructure, well, that has much more utility than the kind of end output here. But afterwards, let's say you kind of create all the vehicles for trading. You figured out a way to, let's say, create a little bit more policing around just outward fraud. Then where do you go? Does this create, and maybe this is an interesting topic, does this create some of the seedlings for crypto winter? I know some folks are thinking about, what are going to be some of those moments if it was previously, the FTX debacle, or it was previously, other means where now we're sort of seeing a crest on the horizon. We have an idea of where Bitcoin might go. Solana's got some room to run. I mean, Mark, do you see some of these events as potentially conspiring a little bit of the next turn of the cycle, or is this potentially just a little blip on the radar here? And there's just
look, humans are going to human.
Yeah,
100%. And the reason cycles exist is partly the code, right? We have the code embedded in Bitcoin around the 4-year halving cycle that incents, right? When you cut the block rewards, you incentivize price movement. Price movement attracts investor activity. And if it gets too great, prices move too fast and they get away from fair value. And that triggers the downtrend. And there's also other factors around liquidity, provision, and subtraction by central banks, et cetera. And so it's a complex thing. And there's the macro element and the micro element. But at the end of the day, again, back to the Trump coin, by Sunday, there were 25 times levered tools on, I think it was on Binance or one of the foreign exchanges, where you could 25 times lever.
Wow.
It's a 100 vol asset, probably, maybe higher, 120. Never, ever should you lever that 25 times. You shouldn't even lever it 2 or 3 times. But when those if the leverage comes back, and the leverage can be in the form of packaging, like repackaging, you're taking a coin, you're putting in an ETF, and then the ETF can be margined and levered. You can't lever the ETF. I mean, you can't lever the meme coin, but you could lever the ETF. So anytime that leverage gets involved, price starts to move away from fair value. And ultimately someone then says, "Ooh, I'm going to short that now." And the first attempt at shorting, you get a squeeze. And that tends to push the parabolic move even further, right? Because they short it, they borrow the security and they short it. And then they have to buy it back, which causes more demand and there's no one selling. And you get this pop. Well, ultimately, gravity rules. And we come back to whatever that. The problem for meme coins, like with Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana or any of the other tokens that actually have some utility, we can calculate a fair value and we can see what the price is. With memes, there's no underlying value there. There's literally just hope in a get rich quick scheme. And is there something to this idea that, well, if enough people have decided that the American dream, which used to be white picket fence, house, mortgage, job, 2 cars, send your kids to private school, if that's gone, right? If the average couple now can't afford a house because housing prices went like this, because the boomers, that was our retirement plan, right? We bought this little piece of real estate. The government stole our wealth through devaluation of the currency, but in exchange, they gave us this, physical asset that in theory is worth a lot, until all the boomers try to sell at the same time and there are no buyers. But that's a problem for another day. But if no one's going to do that, and they're like, hey, I can get super rich super fast just by buying these meme coins. And actually, some people do, right? I mean, there are people who got in super early who make, the big word now is generational wealth. Like, what does that mean? I mean, you're saying that you make enough that you don't have to work, or your kids don't have to work, or your grandkids don't have to work. And certainly there was one wallet that put in $1 million, and it was worth at the peak 450, and now it's down to like 300. But 300 million, that's pretty generational wealth.
Yeah.
3 million, maybe not, because 3 million might not buy very much pretty soon, but
Not in the U.S. Yeah.
no, I mean, I took my son, 13-year-old, had a friend over for a sleepover this past weekend, and we went out to breakfast on Saturday, and we weren't extravagant. I mean, we all had coffees or coffee drinks. The biggest lie perpetuated in America is that a milkshake is coffee, like a frappuccino type thing. I mean, we weren't a Starbucks, but we were similar, and they ordered these drinks that weren't coffee, but whatever. I just had coffee, but 3 drinks and, some pancakes and some eggs and bacon. $75. Like, what? I mean, should have gone to McDonald's.
Yeah.
Should have gone to McDonald's, but we didn't. And so that reality, devaluation of the currency and everything being more expensive, that's a different issue. But it goes to why people are attracted to the get rich quick. Because if that's what it costs to go to breakfast and to buy groceries, someone did a calc the other day. She took an old receipt from last year and she put it into the Whole Foods app. And what was $83 last year was $195 this year. Same stuff. Like, wow. I mean, wow. So I get the pressure to, and you see these big numbers and you hear people talking about becoming a millionaire. I don't know. It's real, but I don't think it's good. And I hope we don't go too far to the world you described, which is the lawless kind of anything goes. And we actually come back for a minute to, hey, we need to keep scaling the blockchain so they work effectively. We need to make them interoperable, and we need to, figure out this mental model of, is it just one L1 or is it multiple L1s? Or does bridging actually work? Is Chainlink, they make a bunch of promises to do their promises. Maybe they do.
And this is kind of your point, Mark, where you mentioned, I love the quote where humans are going to human, and it's a theme on digital currents so often, because it reminds me of the next story when we talk about this executive order issued by President Trump about AI risk. And so basically now the AI risk executive order under Biden in 23 has been repealed. And so basically grounded in the Defense Protection Act. It was meant to mitigate AI risk and establishing testing standards like cybersecurity and AI misuse, which, by the way, Mark, were the very same concerns that the FANG CEOs publicly listed on all of their social medias that have been actively lobbying to take down this executive's order and have actually been successful in creating this. So I think this is a tale of Icarus, if we don't forget our old Greek literature, not trying to get too close to the sun. So on one side, my VC hat says, well, this is a good thing because we want to have technology and innovation continue to grow. But my consumer hat, my dad hat says, well, we also have to be careful in terms of who is doing the growth and the innovation. And then, of course, my legal hat, influenced by my wife, thinks, whoa, this is federal versus state rights. So all these companies are still in California and they're developing their own privacy laws, not to mention what's happening within Europe. So right now, I think this is a bit of a hornet's nest, Mark, but this is definitely something to keep an eye on because it's...
Oh my gosh. Actually, you bring up so many important points. I mean, the hornet's nest of privacy, where companies don't even really know what's happening to the data. Like literally, they're collecting so much of it in such real time. And we're all assenting to it now with the check boxes. And yet there's these interconnectedness of social media and payments. And so data is becoming really a very big issue, which is why it's one of our primary themes. But the other thing on the AI part is the ability of AI tools and ultimately AI agents to take advantage of this data. In theory, they're going to have to permission us every single time.
Right.
Like literally the AI agent, which, in theory would have to get our permission to use our data to, book that restaurant so it doesn't have to eat in the rain like the Matthew McConaughey commercial, right? And it's an extreme example, but it's real. And I think it all comes down to, sadly, at the end, dollars and cents and
Oh, yeah.
And look, the other big announcement in AI, I think yesterday or today, Stargate.
Oh, yeah. We have.
What's Stargate? Okay, well, and why did they pick the name Stargate? Because there's a whole bunch of stuff related to that, and all this talk about UFOs and, Anyway, so Stargate, what is that? So, Masa Son came over and did this thing with Trump before, post-election, before inauguration. And they were talking about, committing money, SoftBank committing money to the U.S. And he said, I commit $100 billion. And, Donald, the negotiator, said, well, how about 200? He said, that's a big number. I couldn't possibly commit to that, but I will think about it. You are my good friend. And, everybody's like, oh, yay. And SoftBank stock went up and everybody's happy. Well, now he comes back post-inauguration, and now they've hooked in Larry Ellison from Oracle, and there was one other, I should know, but anyway, and OpenAI, which SIPA for, right? You get OpenAI in here, and now it's $500 billion,
right,
to build AI data centers. Now we don't know what kind of AI data centers, what they're going to do, and are they just going to buy stuff from those people, or are they going to buy it from everybody? And so but ARM stock went up a lot, and AMD stock. So so $500 billion is a big number. Now, then OpenAI made some big announcements saying, we're going to get right to work. And I shouldn't give him a little credit. Elon's like, they don't have the money yet. Now, Elon and Sam don't like each other right now and all that good stuff, but they don't have the money. So you can't say you're getting to work when you don't have the money. But yes, there's going to be a lot of money thrown at this issue. But ultimately, I think the challenge for me is, has anyone thought through, I mean, maybe they have, but the question for me is, there's a bunch of national security issues there. I mean, Japan's our ally. They're not like China, which we hate. But do we really want Chinese technology companies funding our AI data centers? Now, I guess if they're just providing money and no, other stuff, it's probably okay because the money isn't going to spy on us. But
and then there's the real estate component as well, Mark, because that's one of the points where both administrations kind of had some alignment. The outgoing one and the incoming one covered this in a couple episodes back, where there was one of the final executive orders under Biden, which was supporting resources to address energy needs and real estate for advanced AI data centers. So when you hear about this investment, I think about this as kind of, especially in the world of government, if there is a budget and you don't use that budget will be lost. So right now, they're mysteriously lost.
If there's a demand for energy, if you make a chip and it needs a certain amount of energy, and you can find a way to sell a lot of those chips, then we need a lot of energy. Or we could innovate and make a chip that uses less energy. We actually had a call earlier this afternoon with such company that all these NVIDIA chips, they require a shit ton. My word, not theirs.
Technical term.
Yeah, technical term of energy to produce X numbers of bits of data.
Mm-hmm.
We came up with a way to, instead of doing it in the digital realm, we can do it in the analog realm, the way computers used to be, analog computing versus digital computing. And we can do it for a tiny, tiny fraction, like single digit percentages of the power. Well, then we do have to convert it back to digital, but that uses up a very small amount of power. And that's a different system, but then we could replace those. And I'm not saying NVIDIA is going down because of this company, but the idea that what we should do is what Microsoft is, hey, give me a permit to restart 3 Mile Island. So here's a bunch of money to the lobbyists. So get me that permit. Well, okay, and I'm all for nuclear, but maybe we don't need so much power. Maybe what we need is better chips. And that's why innovation is so interesting and why venture capital is so interesting, in that, the transactions per second is one metric. That's great. 25 million tops. I think I said on a couple episodes ago, for Christmas, I bought my son the new, Jetson, not Jensen, Jetson. It's really the Jensen Nano, the NVIDIA little developer kit that's a GPU. So, a couple of years ago, I bought him the Raspberry Pi, and, I played around with that and made some stuff. It was a cool little robot. Now he's got this GPU, which is like, I think it's 400 times more powerful than that little Raspberry Pi. We'll see what he does with it. Hopefully he won't do anything crazy. But, here he did show me something where he was playing around making, this was actually kind of cool. He connected a circuit where it connected to an LED, and you could control, and again, this is people who understand this, it's simple. To me, it was pretty cool. You could control the individual levels of red, blue, and green and create any color. Like literally, he would just change a couple numbers and boom. And I know that's not a big deal, but that was really cool. And I guess you don't need a lot of computing power to do that, but you can do some other fun stuff. But I think the companies that have the power and the companies that have the ear of government are going to win. And this is the one thing where I didn't like the term. They had the picture of Zuck and Bezos, and when everyone wasn't focused on Zuck looking at Bezos' girlfriend, which whatever, you freeze any video, you can make it tell whatever story you want. But they had the picture of all, what did they say, $844 billion of wealth, and they called them the oligarchs. No. Oligarchs are the people that, the Russian oligarchs, they actually did steal stuff. They confiscated stuff from the citizens. That's a bad term. These are titans of industry. I don't think many of them stole anything. I mean, maybe there was some bad stuff behind closed doors. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but oligarchs is a bad term. But the fact that those tech titans are sitting at the inauguration and then they're going to influence the rules on how this money gets allocated, that's a little dicey.
Yeah. That's going to be less favorable to new innovation than preserving the status quo, my opinion. Yeah, and I think, there's just a lot of opportunities here, Mark, both within where the technology is going, but then also opportunities to provide points of commonality and where people can be protected as well as have their ability to develop and grow their technology, which is a perfect segue into this week's chart of the week, which is actually comes to us by our old friends at the IMF. And so they kind of looked at this idea about AI, and I want to kind of frame this up carefully here, where we look at AI's impact. So in 1 week, we kind of took a look at McKinsey's predictions and where growth is coming from. And, AI was all over the place. But then there are some side effects. Not saying that AI is just going to destroy every job or destroy livelihoods, but we have looked at why so many businesses have been embracing this. And now there are more studies and research showing, okay, here's what could be the current cost to different types of groups and different types of jobs. So in particular, this is an interesting one, and I don't want to have a conspiracy theory yet, although I love just kind of getting my brain thinking like that. So this is actually more focused.
Pattern recognizers.
Yeah. Pattern recognizers. Exactly. Yeah.
Pattern recognizer.
It's hard to turn off the brain, Mark, when that's what we do, 24/7. But, this is focusing in on the APAC region. So if we think about, the Vision Fund or Masimoto's investment in AI, maybe, there are some potential impacts on these kinds of studies, because what this is kind of showing is maybe there's opportunities for policymakers to get out in front of some of these things instead of just letting the technology just sort of put us into a position where maybe it's a point where we're less capable of riding that ship. So this is looking at basically two types of economies: emerging markets and advanced economies, breaking down by male, female, by income level, and kind of showing that there's certain groups that have potentially more impact on things like AI and what that might mean to their labor at current, right? Which is, doesn't really show what could happen as we just create new types of opportunities and jobs. So Mark, I am going to share my screen. Let me know when this comes into focus. Is this too small? Can you see it? I can always try and blow this up.
It's small, but I can see it.
Let me try and see if this lets me put it even larger. Somehow.
There we go.
Okay, let's try. Okay, so for those that are on audio only, as I remind us every week, jump on over to YouTube. We can see all sorts of great things. This week we had a break in Mark's Bitcoin socket reveal because we're doing this off schedule, but we are matching in solidarity for Notre Dame in our green. So we've got advanced economies and female workers in Asia are facing a higher exposure to AI and exposure by income and gender percent. So it's kind of showing a couple of things on this chart. It's showing the breakdown in the impacts of AI on labor within emerging markets, and sort of the male and female is actually kind of similar in an emerging market, which is, I thought, was kind of a little bit of a maybe counterintuitive. You would think that sort of within a developing economy, some of the kind of brute force tax might just be automatically culled to something like, a script that can get created. Whereas in advanced economies, we're going to have potentially higher exposure on the AI side when you're thinking about kind of like the gender breakdown. Again, this is looking at Asia in particular. It's not a global look. It would be very, very difficult to kind of do that. Mark, what is your thoughts on some of this?
No, it's like a bunch of points here. So, one is the definition of advancement in society or progress is that you spend less time on survival, right? Just definitionally. Like, I love that. I was talking to someone earlier today. I love the fact that, it snowed here in North Carolina. It's cold. And I love the fact that I didn't have to figure out how to go outside and hunt my food. Right. So even though I can't get to the grocery store because my car won't make it, I have enough food in the house that I'll be fine. But I don't have a rifle to go hunt, and there are a lot of deer around here. But anyway, I didn't have to do that, so that's good. And I didn't have to go chop firewood because all I do is turn on the gas switch on the fireplace. And so I spent less time surviving and more time, working and doing stuff. And so there's no question that as you go along that process, the most agrarian societies, the ones that still produce all our food and our cattle and all that stuff, they are not really going to be affected by better computers and, AI agents that can make a, travel arrangement because you said you needed a rerouting for weather. No. So now, will they be impacted by robotics? Maybe. But I was talking to somebody earlier today about this. I said, robots are not going to function very well planting rice in the rice paddies. So there are certain machines that can be robotic help to planting rice and make it better than humans. But a humanoid robot, trying to step in the mud isn't gonna work very effectively. And you and I talked about this on a couple shows ago about, is the humanoid form factor the right form factor, or is it the robotic dog thing or some other form factor? If you went back to first principles of what do we want a robot to really do? So I do agree that, look, there are probably more female, office and clerical workers, particularly in Asia, particularly in the big, finance houses and legal houses and sales and service. So clearly, if you're a call center, and call centers, they're, I don't know what the mix is off the top of my head, but when I call the call center, probably 2/3 of the time get a female voice versus a male voice. I do get males, but probably 2/3 of the time. So if that number's right, then the AI caller replacement versus the data center, that is going to affect females. But when we start thinking about manufacturing jobs, or how about the people who are having to fix, when the ice goes on the telephone lines, the line workers are, I guess, at least in the U.S., are like 85, 90. I remember the exact number, male. Again, not good or bad. It just is what it is. But so that those people aren't going to be affected very quickly by AI, but they'll be impacted by, what if we got a technology where we didn't need, where electricity could be beamed to us from a satellite? I'm not saying that can happen, but
right. Or even on the side where you always mention, Mark, which I love when we kind of get to this point, because we're presenting the facts of, okay, day zero, here's kind of how some jobs are going to be impacted, who has access to the internet and a computer, and kind of who's working via that kind of a terminal. But what is not necessarily captured here, and what gives me hope as a optimistic person, is if, let's say, you are working in the fields, could you be influenced by an AI algorithm that increases your field yield, right? Or increases the efficiency of nitrogen into the soil? And I think those things need to at least be considered when we think about the policy, so that we don't just sort of create a technology that creates a bridge to nowhere and increases that gap, that gulf. But if we can think about, okay, we can really target the way the technology can be used, and kind of these are some areas that need a little bit more help. Can we use government money, or can we use investor money to kind of look at some of these areas, because they can also not only be good for the investor, but potentially good for society? That always creates an interesting win-win.
oh my gosh, absolutely. And back to the agrarian, right? If you could be the property owner, right, instead of the property worker, meaning you have a piece of land and you're growing crops on it. And if you could, instead of having to go out there and by hand pull the weeds, have a machine that helps you pull the weeds, and actually go out there and have to look at the sprouts and say, should I put, 2 pounds of fertilizer or 1 pound of fertilizer? If you had a sensor that could tell you exactly how much fertilizer and where and when to put it on. And that is happening all over. I mean, technology is getting better for farming. But if then that field worker could actually be a manager of the technology, and say, well, but then you'd have to grant them land. Yeah, that's an idea. I mean, you could do that. Or you could, have them buy in. I mean, there are all kinds of things that you can do. Society is really good over time, by and large. So that is really good at solving problems. They do it perfectly, and it's not, it doesn't always appease everybody, left, right, center, vertical, whatever. But you're pretty good at solving problems. So if we have idle workers, we find a way to retrain them and reemploy them. It was amazing. So you always hear, right? AI is going to kill all these jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. As did air travel, as did biotechnology, and technology does kill jobs. But still a fact, and I love this fact, today, more than yesterday, there are more jobs today than any time in human history. And yesterday there were, a little bit fewer, and the day before there'll always be more jobs. There'll just be different jobs, and we'll create new types of jobs. And you're talking with a guy who, it's kind of a cool thing. He is repurposing schools. So he's raised a fund, and he buys these old schools that were built for, training factory workers, and he repurposes them. He cleans them up. He gets rid of the asbestos and the bad pipes, and then he reimagines them with, more collaborative learning spaces, and then he does this very cool thing with a sale leaseback to the communities so that they can benefit from the asset as opposed to the liability of having to take care of these things. So he's, repurposing for, future check workers. And he said this one municipality actually took 2 high schools that were old and liabilities, knocked them down, consolidated in this repurposed warehouse that they turned into a new school, but they made it 1/3 total vocational and 2/3 traditional college prep. And everyone's like, no, that. Like, well, no, there's a whole bunch of people. They want to work at HVAC. They want to work as plumbers. They want to work as electricians. They want to work as hairdressers. They want to work as dog groomers. They want to work as massage therapists. And they can be trained and be ready for the workforce. Like, oh my God, that's genius, right? And by having the facility, there isn't he says you don't need a little square room to teach people to be performance, dancers and musicians. They need big performance spaces, collaborative spaces. Like, oh my God, you're right. And it was just interesting hearing him talk, and I did it again, hearing him talk about the repurposing and the reimagining of these physical spaces, leading to the creation of a better, more educated, more talented workforce. And then we throw in the whole, AI tutors could make all of the in-class lecture. And this might, I've talked about this for my personal pet peeve. Why does any freshman in college take freshman chemistry lecture from anyone but the world's greatest chemistry mind? Right? We know who that is. Let's have them record the lecture and everybody watches the same lecture. And then they have group discussions and labs where you do hands-on work around those chemistry principles. That would be a better system. And Khan Academy is perfect. And so, maybe not perfect, but it's pretty amazing. And Sal Khan, greatest teacher ever as far as I'm concerned. But there's so many things we can do to reimagine. And yes, these facts that you show in the chart of the day are real. But those displaced people can be retrained, reimagined, and will be ultimately employed in the businesses that are created by the tools that we're imagining. As long as governments, which are not very good at this, don't get in the way.
Yeah, and I think that's well said, Mark. And it's kind of one of these things as we focus so much about the development of technologies like AI, for us, we're investing 10 years into the future. But then the present is the world that we live in right now, and that creates, dependencies and needs. And I think, it's important to look at the data. I think so many times we forget to do that, or policymakers forget to do that because we're driven by agenda and outcome. And there's many things that happen before then. So, those things to keep an eye on. And we'll probably wrap there, Mark, and say, safe travels for everybody. And also that to remember, as always, to rate, review, subscribe. Thanks so much for those that continue to tune in. We'll be back to you shortly. And as always, stay current. Thank you for joining us this week on Digital Currents. Check out our links to our website and social media in the show's description box. Please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
This podcast should not be construed as investment advice nor solicitation for the sale of any security, advisory, or other service. Investment themes and ideas discussed may be owned by funds managed by the host and podcast guests. Any conflicts at the time of production have been mentioned by the host but are subject to change. Listeners should consult their personal financial advisors before making any investment decisions.